Hey guys, it's Cooper. In this video, we are going to develop a create account component using Chakra UI and React.js. We'll take a look at some of the core Chakra components such as text, buttons, forms, and containers. Throughout the tutorial, I'll go over the Chakra documentation to explain how you can use the docs to further figure out your own problems. Let's first take a look at how you can set up a React application with Chakra. If we go to the installation documentation, you'll see that there's a command here showing you how to install Chakra for an already existing React application. We don't have that, so we want to go over to the Create React App installation instructions. You'll see over here we're going to have an option to create a React app with a template that uses Chakra UI. This is pretty much going to allow us to have all the Chakra functionality we need and then create a React app at the same time. So the installation instructions assume that you already have npm installed. So if you don't, you're gonna have to look into installing Node.js and then npm as well. But for us, I already have npm installed, so we're good there. I'm gonna be using VS Code as our text editor here, but you can honestly use whatever you want. If you're using VS Code, something good to note is that there's a built-in terminal. So if you go to the bottom here and then drag up, you're gonna have a terminal and it's already gonna be in your directory, whichever one you chose. So now that we have access to our terminal, we can pretty much take the template code they have for npx over here, copy paste it in, and that's going to create our React app with the Chakra template like I mentioned before. All right, so now our React app is set up. You'll see it's going to have all the basic functionality you'll see from a regular Create React app. One of the first folders is Node Modules, which shows all the dependencies of your React app, so that's any extra functionality added on top, anything that React needs to run pretty much. Then you'll have public, which is kind of like the user-facing stuff. You'll have like your index HTML in here. Maybe you'll have a couple of photos. They go here pretty much. For us, the majority of our coding is going to take place in app.js. You'll see if we do npm start here, we're pretty much going to start our React application. And let's see here, it should open over here, yep. And it should show us pretty much what we're seeing inside of app.js is the basic way of thinking about it. So since we're using Chakra and a bunch of different dependencies, it might take a little bit to load. And here we go. So you'll see the learn Chakra at line 33 is the learn Chakra over here. You'll see we have some type of spinning logo here. That's also going to be in here somewhere. Right here at line 22 is going to be the logo. And so this is just to show you guys, this is the code we're editing, right? So let's just say learn React instead of Chakra, right? We can save that and then it's going to change the text over here to pretty much what we changed. So now we can kind of get started on, getting rid of all this stuff, right? So let's just delete everything and let's just do text and just say hello. So you'll see it's looking way more basic now, right? And we are going to want to instead create that component I showed you guys in the beginning of the video with, a login and a bunch of different things like that. Let's get started with looking at some of the basic Chakra documentation to kind of go through and see how Chakra handles things like containers, for example, right? So we can go over the documentation and look up container, I'm assuming, and let's see, it looks like it exists, which is great. And you'll see we have a bunch of different types of containers, pretty much things that are text or, other blocks are contained within, right? And so we're going to want a container so our hello isn't to the very side like that, right? We want it to be in a large box so we can kind of move it around, right? And it's going to be a core part of our component. So let's go in here and take a look at how they have different containers. You'll see they have containers in a vertical stack here, a container with a bunch of text inside of it, right? So let's just take this container with a bunch of text and bring it over to our code. And I'm also just going to do this. We don't need all that text. We can just put hello, and it can give us a decent idea as to how it's working. All right, so this is great. So container is not defined. This is because as we use things inside of Chakra, we need to make sure we're actually asking the Chakra UI React for that certain component. So you'll see here from line 2 to line 11, we have everything we've included so far, right? And so now we're going to add container to that list. Now it's going to recognize container and you'll see we're in a really good spot now. We can pretty much see that we have a container here. It says hello, and now hello isn't in the corner. It's probably a box, like a rectangle, that's kind of a little bit inwards, right? So this is really great. But we don't want to just say hello. We probably want this container to have some type of box element inside of it so we can create a border around our Chakra element. So let's go into Chakra. I already know this one exists, but if you didn't know this existed, you could probably look up like, Chakra container slash like box or like, div. You're probably going to find it, right? But we know box exists and it's an abstract component, they say, so that means it can be used a lot of different ways, right? And it's pretty much going to have a couple things. So we can take a look at these attributes or properties that are given to box to kind of get an idea as to how the documentation works, right? You'll see this box has a background of tomato, so it's that color. It has a width of 100%, so it's taking up its entire container. It has a padding of 4, which is kind of why the text is like this. And it has a color of white, which I'm assuming is the text color of what's inside the box. So we can kind of make a box on our own here, kind of looking at the same thing. So let's just take a box here and make our own, right? So let's take a look at our box here and say background equals, let's see here. We can do tomato for now, but it's going to look a little bit strange. I want to give this box a border. So let's see if there's any examples where there's a box with a border anywhere. So you see how this box has a like little gray border around it? We can kind of take their styling here. It's border width 1 pixel and border radius large. We can take that and then hopefully it's going to give us a, let's add something inside of this real quick. It's going to give us a border, it looks like. So if we make this background not tomato, what's going to happen? Oh, great. So it's giving us a 1 pixel border around our component, which is exactly what we want. So pretty much what I did there is I didn't want the, tomato background anymore, right? But I still wanted the border width and the border radius. Something worth explaining there is this box is going to be nothing unless it has stuff inside of it, right? So I had to add a little hello there so the box has something to wrap around. But this text is still a little strange. It's kind of on the edge here. And we can kind of follow what we saw up here where it says padding is equal to 4, the p is equal to 4. We can take that and bring it over to our own component. And then this is going to give us a little bit more pleasing thing to look at. Just, makes it so the text isn't right on the edge of the component, right? And so, yeah, this component wanted to say something like, create account or something along those lines, right? And we want the text to be styled a certain way. So we should go look in Chakra UI and see how that text is made. Okay, so you can see we have all different types of sizes when it comes to text in Chakra UI. We can just choose one for now. I'm gonna just go extra large and see what that looks like. And let's just make it say what we want it to say eventually, which is create account. All right, great. I also want this text to be centered. It's going to make our component just look a little bit nicer, a little bit more straightforward. So let's see if there are any examples for centering text. So align. Let's see if we can add in align equals center, I'm assuming. See if that helped us out. Great, so now that we have align equals center, it gets our create account to the center of whatever box it's contained in. All right, now we're gonna want some text under this that says like, do you already have an account? Then how about you log in, for example? So let's go make something like that. Let's just say this, already have an account, question mark. We might wanna make it a little bit smaller so that create account is the main focus. And we could even make, let's see here. Let's make this one on top larger. I think 2XL was an option before. Okay, looks great to me. And now we're going to want to do some type of thing like a link, because if you see, if we just say login, right, there's nothing for us to click on, right? And so let's look up a link here, and you'll see that it's supported by Chakra UI. It's a pretty common thing to have a link. And let's see. We can just take this link here and see what that does for us. So we can say link. Okay, so this is looking good, but we kind of want the Chakra UI part, or eventually this part to say login, but we also want it to have different styling. And so we can go in and maybe in link, we'll see if it's a way to make it a different color. Oh, great. So here we have a good example. Color is teal 500, href is, a pound sign, which means it's going to nowhere pretty much. But you could change that to go to an actual link in your website. All right, so now we have this login functionality here. So if we wanted to expand on top of this component, what we could do is make a property to pretty much allow this login link to go to whatever login link you want to make. All right, so now that we're this far, we kind of need to consider making some text boxes. So the user can enter their, username, their password, their email, things like that, right? And so let's go into Chakra UI and look up if there's anything like an input or a text box. So input looks like it exists. Let's see if it's what we want. So you'll see they actually have some more advanced stuff like, a password one, some controlled input it looks like. For this video, we're just going to do some very basic inputs, and possibly afterwards you could go in and check these, password inputs out yourself and try and implement them yourself, I would say. But for now, I think we could just do the generic input like we've seen above, where it has a placeholder with some text. So let's just add in an input and see what it does. Okay, so input's not defined, so we're going to go in and make sure that we grab that from the Chakra UI React. I think one thing off the bat is you'll see how this input's kind of close to the rest of the text, right? What we can do is we can do PB for padding bottom, and we can set it to, let's just say 4. This is going to give us a little bit of room so we have some space in between the two things. And that's a common thing in Chakra is, let's see, look into padding here, and I can show you guys. M2 means margin 2 pretty much. And M23 is like, let's see, that's a little bit more complicated, but pretty much it's true that there's like these M, and then P is like for margin and padding. So ML would be like M, like margin left. PR is going to be padding right, stuff like that, right? And so PB is going to be padding bottom. And so let's create a list of these inputs. All right, so we're going to run into an issue here where let's just say we make a list of these inputs where they're going to be very close together. So Chakra actually has something that helps us with vertical stacks. They call it a V stack, I believe. They have these things that are called stacks, and they kind of help you when you have a bunch of components like this. So this VStack example right here is great. It kind of shows us that they have a custom divider between each thing in your stack, kind of like how we're going to have a bunch of these. We might want to divide them, we might want to add padding between them, and it would kind of be strange to go into each input and say padding bottom 2 like 4 times. Because then if you ever wanted to change that padding, you'd have to change it in 4 different areas. It's kind of unsustainable. So something we would want to do instead is to pretty much use a VStack. So that spacing, for example, is 4. And then that spacing, is going to apply to all of the elements in your vertical stack. So let's copy over this VStack code. And we don't need the divider, so don't worry about that. And align stretch, I think we're fine with. That's kind of what we want anyways. And so let's close this VStack up. And let's just put 2 inputs in there for now. Okay, and we can delete these other inputs here. I'm just showing 2 just for an example. So let's see what it makes our code look like. Okay, so this is pretty good. I think that spacing might be a little bit too much, so we can go to spacing like 2, and I think that's great. Let's go in and now add in stuff like username, password, and then all right, so now we have the 4 different forms that we'd want when logging in and creating an account. And so the last final thing we're missing is maybe a button at the bottom to show, when a user fills in all this information with their, username here, their email at email.com here, and then their password here. They're going to want to click a button now. So we have to go and create that. So let's go see if there's any buttons that look like something we could use here. All right, so after looking at the documentation for a second, we can see that the buttons are pretty generic. So let's just take a button and then bring it over to our code. So this button has like a color scheme and a variant, but besides that, it's pretty normal. And as always, we have to go to the top and add in button. So the button looks a little bit off. It's really close to the vertical stack we added before. So we can try and add padding to the bottom of our overall vertical stack and see if that helps us out. So padding bottom, let's just say 3 for now. And there we go. So now we're going to have padding to the bottom of the overall vertical stack. It's important to see that we didn't add padding to the bottom of every single element. It added it to this vertical stack overall. So just at the bottom of that larger block. We want this button to say create account. So let's just do that to kind of get an idea of what this is going to look like. Create account, great. And I think for simplicity's sake, I was looking through the button documentation, and something important about docs is you could look and see up here, they kind of tell you a bunch of different things. They tell you like different ways of, them implementing it and showing you. But something important is a lot of these components have their own properties, and you can look through and kind of see what type of properties are in the, Chakra UI buttons. And something that's going to help us out here is full width. If this is true, the button will take up the full width of its container, and it looks like it's normally false. So we can go in and do this. Add is full width, and then set it equal to true. And now this is going to give us that kind of look that we want where the entire button takes up the full width, kind of makes it easier to click and kind of makes it easier to see. All right, so we're almost done. I think for this example, it would make sense for us to add a little bit of margin to the top of the container just to make it look nice. So like I said before, we can do MT for margin top. And let's just add a little bit at the top so you can kind of see that this box goes all the way around. And now we have a create account component. You could use this in like a Jumbotron type thing where there's an image on the left and then the create account shows up on the right. You could use this, literally anywhere. So it's kind of nice to create components like this because they're super usable throughout your React applications. And Chakra makes it super easy to build things like this very fast. Another great important part of this is you can see this create account is going to scale to a phone, for example. So if someone was on their phone, they'd be able to use it. Then also it's going to reach its max container width. And then you'll also be able to use this if you were on a desktop, for example, it would still look great. Hopefully this has been a good introduction to Chakra UI. I'm a backend developer myself, and so I kind of like to do videos like this to show people that front end is approachable. Thanks for watching. I also think it's important for people to kind of go on their own ways and kind of create their own features. So some things I'd recommend you do here is maybe email validation here. Right now we don't do any email validation, and you'll even see the password, it doesn't really show the dots like you would expect a password form to show. So you can do some validation things in React, and that should be really great practice. You could also, when you press create account, you could have something run that makes sure the passwords are the same, for example. So just giving you some ideas to kind of work on this beyond just this video.